In the last Ontario election in June of 2018, Liberal candidates fell in riding after riding after riding. By the end of the night, Premier Kathleen Wynne had barely held her own seat, but the rout was on. Just 7 Liberal MPPs returned to Queen's Park. However, the latest polls show the Liberals are back in the game, coming first in surveys even without a permanent leader in place. Let's now meet the 6 candidates who want to lead the party into the next election, and here they are in alphabetical order. Michael Coteau, former cabinet minister, now the MPP for Don Valley East. Stephen Del Duca, former cabinet minister and former MPP for the riding of Vaughan. Kate Graham, the 2018 candidate in London North Centre who teaches politics at Western University. Brenda Hollingsworth, an Ottawa-based personal injury lawyer who's never run for elected office. Mitzie Hunter, former cabinet minister, now the MPP for Scarborough-Guildwood. And Alvin Tedjo, 2018 candidate in Oakville, North Burlington. And we welcome all 6 of you here to TVO for this one and only televised debate. We're glad to have you here. Let's just do some housekeeping issues off the top here. We're not doing sort of a formal debate with formal rules and opening speeches and closing speeches and all that. We're just going to have a conversation here. And while we would love it if you engaged with each other and mixed it up, we are... let me put it this way. We got an army of producers in that control room running a stopwatch on all of you to make sure that everybody gets roughly equal time here, and I'm going to try to implement that as well. So if I interrupt you in the middle of an answer, I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to make sure everybody gets equal time. Okay, with that, I think we also have to allow for the possibility that there are many people watching us either this afternoon live or later tonight who have not seen you before and who are brand new to this story and this process. So I say that in some respects to get you to, I guess, allow me to set up this first question by saying I still want to look back at what happened a little over a year and a half ago and find out whether or not you folks understand the message that the people of Ontario were sending to, in some cases, some of you at this table, and in all cases, the Liberal Party of Ontario. What have you really learned about why Ontarians wanted to punish you so much? Let's go in alphabetical order to start off. Michael Coteau.
So traveling throughout the province, I was able to speak to so many different Ontarians, Liberals, and the thing that I kept hearing from Liberals and from people in the province was that there was a disconnect between the policies that we were putting forward, how people were feeling, the anxieties weren't being addressed. So you look at issues like housing and transit, affordability, and the solutions were not coming forward in a way that made them feel that they were being protected through government legislation. So I think that there was that disconnect that was there, and I think part of the building of this new Liberal Party is going to be to address those types of issues that people are facing, and to build a party that's really aligned with where people want to go today.
Stephen Del Duca.
I think Michael's right. I would also say, I think we have to look at the whole picture. So Ontario Liberals governed for just about 15 years. And in our travels, in my travels, certainly, I've heard from a lot of Ontarians, not just Liberals, but Ontarians, who have said to us, you did a lot of things really well. We don't burn coal anymore in this province to produce our electricity. We have a green belt. We have full-day kindergarten. We have lots of other things that demonstrate the progress that Ontario Liberals helped deliver. We were not a perfect government. Obviously, the decision that was rendered on June the 7th of 2018 was a really tough one. I lost my own seat in the legislature. I think, to Michael's point, people did feel that we were increasingly out of touch, particularly with their cost of living pressures. And I think also there was a sense that we were very much focused on Queen's Park and on governing and on the precinct around Queen's Park. We all know Ontario is a massive province, and there are regions across the province that want to see leadership that's based on listening to them and their concerns and not simply kind of lecturing at them. And I think that's something that we have to rediscover as we once again regain the trust of the people of Ontario.
Kate Graham.
So I think people are kind of sick and tired of politics. The last election was a message that we want change. For a lot of people, I don't think they're happy with the change they got. So we as a party need to hear that. Hyper partisanship and division between parties, people know that that's not how the real world works. They want to see leaders who can listen to each other, who can rise above partisanship to be able to make real progress on issues that matter: climate change, inequality, education, healthcare. They are too important for partisan bickering. And I think people felt like we were governing in order to win elections, sometimes instead of about them. So I am in this race because I want to change our party. I want us to be focused on people and well-being and move beyond partisanship so that we can work across party lines where it's needed, where it makes sense to be able to make real change for Ontarians.
Brenda Hollingsworth.
A lot of times I think people are a little bit more blunt with me because I am an outsider, so I hear things maybe that some of the other people at this table don't hear. And what I heard was really, at the end, a lack of trust. People I talk to regularly talk about that stretch goal with the auto insurance and how all of these promises were made about lowering auto premiums in exchange for reducing coverage, and they got the coverage reduction but not the premium reduction. Things like that caused a fundamental lack of trust. When the minimum wage was increased, I agree with that. Most Ontarians agree with that. But the vilification of small business in Ontario when they said, hey, this is hard, that resonated with a lot of small business owners. And, there's a lot of small business owners who are good, solid citizens who want to pay a living wage, but they needed help. And instead of getting help, they got ridicule. So I think there's a trust component that needs to be regained.
Mitzie Hunter.
So I agree with what Kate has said in terms of people wanted change. It was 15 years and they wanted something different. Yes, we had done some really good things. I agree with that, Stephen, particularly on the education front. When you look at our graduation rates, that, almost a third of students were now graduating that were not under the previous Conservative government. So people were, they saw that we had done some good things as Liberals, but they were tired of what they were hearing and they wanted something different. And, what came about was Doug Ford. And I think that people are looking at this saying, wow, the things that I valued, I talked to a lot of students whose OSAP programs are now cut because this government has taken away those financial aids from students. And they're feeling the pain of that. They're concerned about access to health care. They're also concerned about a divide in this province, that, northern and rural communities are being left behind in terms of the economic growth that we're seeing amongst cities and our urban centers. And there's a real question mark about who is leading this province and where that is all going. But in terms of 2018, I think that's the message that people sent, that they wanted to change in this province.
Alvin Tedjo.
So I think we have a real challenge in this province. There's been a lot of change over the last number of years, and I don't feel that the government was fully keeping up with that change. I have a young family. My kids are 5, 7, and 9 years old. And there's a lot of people in my generation now who are struggling with the cost of childcare. They're struggling with the cost of rent being higher than mortgages and tuition being out of reach. We need to start giving people a reason to vote for us. And I think people got the sense that we were trying to buy them off in the last election. And we really needed to connect and find a way to address the real concerns that families are having and how they're struggling every day.
All right, I understand that all 6 of you think you've got the right stuff to lead this party in the next election. I also look at 152 years of Ontario history, and it is very rare for a government that wins, particularly wins a majority government, not to get a second term. Is this party ready to govern again in 2.5 years? The public has some views on that. I'd like to know your views. Stephen, start us off.
I think we will be. And I think we live in an era now in politics and in life, generally speaking, where a lot of the old patterns that have been established and are conventional change a lot quicker. I think this is an era where there's disruption in every aspect of our lives. And so I think that, there are 6 incredible people, and I'm including myself on that list if that's okay. There are 5 fantastic people and me running for leader of this party, all kidding aside. And I would say we come out of this convention, this gathering of a political family on March the 6th and the 7th, if we're focused, if we are united, and I know we will be. We will have 26 months in which to prepare for an election, and I am absolutely convinced, seeing the energy and the enthusiasm that we've all experienced on the campaign trail, that we can get this right because we're focused on the 15 million people who call this province home. And that's the work that lies ahead of us.
One of the things I did hear, though, frequently during the last election campaign is that many people who voted Liberal in the past felt that the party had moved too far away from the so-called activist center where it had traditionally lived and was sort of competing with the NDP to be, I mean, if I heard it once, I heard it 10 times. Which is the more socialist party in this province right now? Kate Graham, where does this party need to be ideologically in the future?
We need to be focused on the issues that matter in people's lives.
But the solutions come from where?
So in the last election, people would make comments about was it too far to the left, et cetera. But when you look at the policies we were running on, minimum wage, more investments in mental health, more investments in transportation, these are things that people want, they like, they know that it matters in their lives. And so I am less interested in talking about an ideological scale that, even as a political scientist, people have difficulty pinpointing where they are. I think that we need to focus on the issues that matter to people's lives and put forward real solutions to the problems that they face.
But Michael, again, one of the things I heard was, we understand the Liberals want to be to the left of the Conservatives, but traditionally they always wanted to be to the right of the NDP. On many issues, the Liberals were to the left of the NDP. Is that where you would want this party to be if you were leader?
I think one of the problems that the party has today is that you do have those distinctions even within the party. So Kate was saying earlier how there's a lot of partisanship in politics today. But even within political parties, the Conservatives have social conservatives, they've got, red Tories. Liberals have divides within the party. And I think that the biggest challenge we have as a party, and actually as Liberals, people who believe in liberalism in general, not only in Ontario, but across this country and North America and around the world, is that we have to stop, as progressives, we have to stop debating each other internally and focus on those big issues that matter the most to people. Issues like Alvin was talking about, with affordability, housing, childcare. These are huge issues, and I think that the biggest challenge that Liberals have today is to convince people that they're actually addressing the issues that affect their lives. And that was the big mistake, I think, in the last, not only 5 years, but I think in the last few decades internationally as Liberals. We missed the mark when it comes to the new economy and those, in the age of disruption. So we need to build a party that's prepared to actually address the real issues. And if we can do that in the next 2 years, I believe that there's a pathway to victory to remove Doug Ford from Queen's Park and to bring in a government that actually is aligned with where people want to go.
But Mitzie, I guess what I'm really trying to figure out is, who among you believes that government is more often than not the solution to every problem, whereas Conservatives believe the government less often is the solution to every problem? Where does this party need to be on that big question?
I think we need to be in the balanced middle. I think it's based on the science and the evidence. That's where that has to dictate the direction we go in. There are things that we've done as Liberals. When you look at the environmental contribution, closing those coal-fired plants, that's a generational contribution. It was the right thing for us to do. Putting a tax on carbon or a cost to carbon, making polluters pay. That's another generational contribution. The fact is that the Conservatives came in and ripped up that plan, and now the Auditor General says, they have a substandard plan that's not going to meet the targets. I don't think that's what Ontarians want. And Ontarians want a province that is prosperous, where we have good education and health care, and where young people have a chance at a better life. And I think that's where Liberals do best, when we're focused on the balanced center.
Alvin, where does this party need to be?
We're a progressive party. We get elected on progressive ideas, but we have to have pragmatic solutions and pragmatic ways to implement them. And I think that's what differentiates us between us and the New Democrats, is that they have lofty goals in terms of their ambition and what they want to do, but there's no practical way of implementing that. And take our universal childcare program, for example. They want to only have it be amongst public sector in order to implement it. The amount of spaces that we need to provide universal childcare is enormous. We need to work with the existing system that we have right now. We need to talk about all our ideas as economic ones, right? All the social programs that we introduced have a huge economic impact, and Ontarians need to understand that impact, and we need to be better at delivering that message.
Brenda, your view on this?
I consider myself a centrist. I think it's important to communicate to Ontarians that we are mindful of spending their money and that there is no such thing as free childcare, free health care. It's all taxpayer funded. I know a lot of Liberals are concerned when we're not talking about looking at the deficit, especially when we're not in a recession. Liberals care about not running up a deficit. They care about leaving debt to their future, and I think we do have to be mindful of that.
Well, can I press you on that? Let's find out how much you all care about the deficit, because, of course, the previous Liberal governments had managed the finances of the province in such a way as to get back into balance, and once they did, they decided, apparently in the last election, that they weren't running on a balanced budget after all. They wanted to go back into significant deficit to pay for programs that were being promised. I hear you saying that you have an eye on the bottom line now, that you care about a lot more. Kate Graham, the deficit, how important is it to you to get that back to balance?
I believe I'm the only candidate here who has a plan and a fiscal anchor on my website about the debt and deficit. I think we need to acknowledge that we do have a lot of debt in Ontario. It is not from program spending. We have the lowest program spending per capita of any province in the country. It comes from the two big recessions, one in 1990 and in 2007. We did not decrease our spending on programs as our revenues were going down, and it led to a lot of debt. So we need to set a long-term plan that includes a range of the debt to GDP ratio that we will not go outside. And I'm very committed to establishing that long-term plan and not moving outside it.
So if we're at 40% today, and it was 12% in Bill Davis's day, 40 years ago, where do we need to be in by when?
I've been asking lots. So my policy team is led by an economist, Mike Moffat, and I've been asking him what is the range that economists generally would advise. I think it's a little lower than where we are today. But for a long time, Ontario has been in the 30% range. And, the financing agencies seem to be very comfortable with that. So we need to set that target.
You're a former junior finance minister. How long should this province take to balance the books if you were premier?
I'm also the current finance critic for our party in our caucus. And, like Kate, I also have on my website my economic plan. It was posted today. And it does look at the cost of servicing our debt and our debt to GDP ratio. And that's important, as well as what the interest rates are in terms of the amount of revenues that we're taking in to service that debt. Now, the conditions right now are favorable. We have a lot of long-term debt at very favorable rates. It also matters what we're spending that money on. Is it on infrastructure that's going to be here for the next 100 years? That's going to grow and expand our economy. As much as in Bill Davis's era, it was at 12%. Well, we have 14.5 million people now in this province, and we have an economy that has grown under Liberal leadership by over $300 billion. And that's the question that I asked Premier Ford and his Conservatives, because right now they're not investing in those long-term things like education, in fact, that does grow our economy. And that's the focus that we have to have. We have to make sure that in good times that we make the right sets of decisions to not spend more than we take in. And when those economic downturns happen, people are going to turn to governments to do fiscal spending to stimulate the economy.
Okay, but Michael, and I don't mean this to sound like a chippy question, but my hunch is that a lot of people in this province thought during the last election there wasn't a spending program that Liberals didn't like, that where you could spend, they would. And it explains one of the reasons why the debt's approaching $350 billion and why the deficit is where it is today. How important would it be for you to balance the books?
It would be very important for me to balance the books. And I also think there's a huge misconception out there in regards to our debt. You look at Bill Davis's government, he never balanced the budget once. There were seven times in the last 40 years that budgets were balanced. I believe 5 by Liberals, 2 by Conservatives. And we have to look at the debt in this province and really understand what that means. Half of it's tied to infrastructure and assets, so we don't use the same calculations as other jurisdictions. And to say that Ontario is a subnational, when you compare the subnational or Ontario to other countries, we are in the top tier of countries when it comes to revenue, expenditure, size of economy. So I think we have to stop comparing Ontario to American states and other jurisdictions, provinces, and start to look at Ontario because of its taxation policy and the law that it, and the responsibility of the legislature, start to compare it against other countries, and you'll find that Ontario is in a very good place.
Stephen Del Duca, if you were premier, how many years would you want before you balance the books?
So I think, Brenda made a point a couple of minutes ago. Look, at the end of the day, the people of this province work very, very hard for the money that they earn. And they have an expectation that when government invests the money that they've earned, that we invest things, that government invests in those things that matter most to them and their families. I think as Liberals, generally speaking, we believe in fiscal responsibility. We perform at our best when we are pursuing fiscal responsibility. But I also consider that if an individual Ontarian or a loved one of that Ontarian happens to fall sick and their entire life shrinks down to the size of a hospital bed, and they or their loved one is simply looking for an answer from a doctor or a nurse practitioner, in that critically vulnerable and important moment, that Ontarian's not contemplating what the exact size of the deficit is. They want a healthcare system that works for them and is on their side. And the same thing exists in education. The same thing exists in confronting the climate crisis. The same thing exists in places like the GTHA and beyond when it comes to transit investments. So I think it's important for us to be fiscally responsible, to consistently remind ourselves as we regain the trust of the people of this province that we do know how hard they work for their money, but we want to invest it on their behalf and the kind of progress that they need. And if we focus on that, again, I think we'll do well.
Okay, but I'm going to follow up here because I said, how many years do you want before you balance the books? How many years?
Yeah, so look, we don't know where we're going to be in 2022. I don't think there are many Ontarians left, including in his own caucus, who trust Doug Ford on the numbers. We're going to see in a number of weeks what allegedly the budget deficit is this year. We don't know where we're going to be in 2022. What I do know is that our public health care will be eroded. Our public education will continue to be under assault. There will be no credible plan to confront the climate crisis, and our economy will not have the kind of prosperity that's broadly shared. And so that's something that we have to correct.
I also want to say, exactly what Stephen has pointed out, that, under Doug Ford's Conservatives, he's spending $5 billion more than we did in our last budget. And Ontarians are not getting any more services, that they really count on. There's a fight right now with teachers because he wants to put cuts into the classroom. The healthcare system, in some areas like in mental health, is stalled. There are no more supports in place. And so, that myth has to be busted, that Conservatives are somehow managing the economy better than we as Liberals. It is absolutely not true.
Kate.
This is what I think Ontarians are not looking for. So, I hear your comments around Doug Ford. I agree with them, but I don't think that Ontarians are looking for us to just blame this government for the spot that we're in. The fact of the matter is that our debt has accumulated under governments of all stripes. What they are looking for is a concrete plan. So I am not going to put any time or energy into blaming the current government. I think we all own this together as Ontarians. What we need is a long-term financial plan that is well established by economists, people who know this stuff very well, and a commitment across parties to stick to it. That's how we get ourselves out of this situation.
Brenda, you want to come in on that?
Well, I mean, my focus in my campaign has really been on growing the economy. I think that's what I hear from people is, what are you going to do to grow it? And when I look at all of the missed opportunity in this province, we've got millennials who are generally underemployed, working multiple jobs, never going to have the kind of career that I had, for example. I see that as missed opportunity, and we want to deal with the deficit and grow our economy. We need to get them working the way they can in the full capacity. We need to grow our biotech, our green tech, our high tech, expand opportunities. We need to work with our trades so that there are tons of jobs that are not filled because we don't have bodies to fill them. I think that's the emphasis that Liberals want, that voters want. Let's put Ontarians to work so that they can participate in the economy, grow the economy, and then we have money for the programs that Liberals love to make people's lives better.
Alvin, last word on the economy here.
Steve, we can't do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. I'm one of the two millennials on this stage, and we've got a completely different set of circumstances now. We're expected to have 3 to 5 different careers over our lifetime. We have more education than any previous generation before us, on top of the fact that we have more debt than any generation before us. We're also looking at the fact that we need to change that structure. We need to change the game. And you often have here Hugh Siegel on this program. And Hugh and I have talked extensively around the need for us to change how we support people in this province. And what he talks about is a universal basic income. And we had a pilot. Doug Ford broke his promise. He canceled that pilot. I want to bring it back, not just the pilot. I think we're ready to do this moving forward because right now we have over 2 million Ontarians living in poverty. And as like Michael said, if we were a country, we'd be the 20th largest economy in the world. And it's unacceptable right now that 1 out of every 5 children are currently living in poverty in this province.
Okay. This is an issue we'll come back to, but I think before we get much further along here, and you opened the door to this a second ago, so I want to go through it. The 6 of you may have heard there's some dispute with the teacher unions in this province right now. And I know none of you is going to say that you think the Ford government is currently handling this in the best way possible, but I do think viewers want to know, and those listening on podcast as well, I think they want to know that if you were in the chair, what would you do to try to resolve this thing? Let's get specific. Stephen Del Duca, you first.
So I'd actually be at the table negotiating. And I mean, right from the very beginning. In fact, from before the very beginning, Doug Ford's government decided to introduce and pass preemptive legislation that effectively knocked out the legs from a collective bargaining process that's authentic and in good faith. And so I think it's really
This is the
important.
1%
Yeah, this
salary
is the
increase.
1%, across the board. And I think it's important to be at the table and come to the discussions and the negotiations authentically open-minded to a solution that's going to work. I think it's also really important to recognize, what are you hoping to achieve with the negotiation if you're the government? Do you actually really want class sizes to grow so that the education experience for our youngest kids is brutally worse than it was not that long ago? Do you want graduation rates to drop?
No, but I think they genuinely want to hold salaries to 1%. Are you saying that you'd be prepared to pay teachers more than that?
I'm telling you, and I'm telling Ontario, that if you're focused on making sure that class sizes remain small and that graduation rates continue to climb, that our professional educators feel safe and secure in the classroom at all times, and that our youngest, including my daughters, are actually getting the kind of public education that they need in order to thrive for the future, that informs the way that you negotiate. And Doug Ford and his government have done the polar opposite in these negotiations, and they shouldn't be surprised at the result they see, and that's not good enough for the people of Ontario.
Okay, but just so I'm clear, you would take the 1% cap that the government currently has on off.
I wouldn't introduce legislation that preempts collective bargaining. That's not collective bargaining anymore. And so I think at the end of the day, if you're at the table and you're having a real conversation, there's always give and take. That's the very nature of collective bargaining. They're not at the table. They're putting out fancy videos. They're trying to vilify professional educators. It's not the way to build a strong society, and it's not the way to build the right kind of economy that we need.
Mitzie Hunter, you're a former education minister. How would you resolve this thing?
Yeah, first of all, I would change the tone. I just think it's very, very negative. It's less than collaborative, and it's not focused on why everyone should be at the table, which is the good outcomes for students in this province. And so the whole conversation needs to change, Steve. The bargaining by social media is not acceptable. The 1% preemptive cap, that was the spark, but it's the disrespectful way in which that was done. I was in the media studio the day that was announced, and the labor unions came into Queen's Park saying nobody talked to us. When I was education minister, I did not make pronouncements in the public without first picking up the phone and calling our education partners. I just felt that that was the way that you work collaboratively, is that you actually talk to them in advance of making those decisions and get their input, because maybe you can come out with a better decision. Under the Liberals, in fact, there were many years where there were no increases because the economy just couldn't bear it. And so the conversations that we need to have at the table need to be done at the table in a respectful way, and it needs to be done in good faith. So information should not be withheld. So right now the government has a survey on class sizes, on e-learning, and they're not releasing that from parents who have said that they're not in support of the government's direction.
Okay, Michael Coteau, you're a former school board trustee.
Yeah.
How would you bring this to an end?
So I agree with what's been said. I believe that Mitzie's right, that our educators in the past have taken a step back when the economy's not done well. But here you have so they've done their part to ensure that the system remains intact. But we have a premier now who, on one side, is saying we've got to, everyone's got to sacrifice a little bit, and everyone's got to give. And a minute later, saying, "My friends, we have the best economy on the planet. Things are great. Jobs, economy's doing so well." So you can't have those two storylines at play at the same time. Either we're doing well, or we're actually in a bit of a financial, crisis or circumstance where we can't pay our teachers more. I think there's a bit of a falsehood in his approach, and I believe what Doug Ford needs to do is to really align increases to teachers' salaries with inflation and where our economy's at, and get to the real issues. Teachers are not, debating the compensation. It's about the classroom size. It's about the mandatory e-learning. These are the things that go against the principles that teachers have and the pedagogy they believe in. So the real question is, show us the data, explain to us why you think that approach is actually going to be good for the school system, and then let's have a respectful conversation. And the tone is very important as well.
Okay, Graham, you are a teacher, professor, actually. How would you bring this to an end?
I very much agree with the comments that we just heard. I spent 10 years working in a management role in a public sector organization. We had 5 unions. There is no question that collective bargaining only works when it starts from a place of respect. This has been a problem brewing for a long time. Even during this campaign, I've been surprised to hear some of the things that teachers have been worried about. You know, at kindergarten teachers talk to me about violence in the classroom. When you increase the ratio and you remove adults from the classroom, the kind of turmoil that it can create, both for the students and for the educators. So it's a tough position that we're in provincially, where we see such a battle, and that, as Mitzie said, that tone needs to change immediately.
Alvin Tedjo, how would you bring this thing to an end?
So, Steve, one of the things that I think we need to acknowledge is that currently we have duplication in the system. We have two school boards. We have a religious school board and a non-religious school board. And right now, there was a study that was done that showed that we could save over $1.6 billion a year if we moved away from that system. There are 10 provinces and territories that don't have separate school funding. We're one of the last 3 left in Canada. And what I want to look at this, it's not just about the savings, it's also about the opportunity for the students and for the teachers. Right now, if you are a student who is trying to go to a school that's across the street from you, you could be denied access to that school if you're the wrong religion. If you're a teacher who's qualified and wants to teach at a school, you could be denied access to teaching at that place because you're the wrong religion.
That is constitutionally protected discrimination.
Which is, yes, but it's been amended and changed in several other provinces, including Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador, within the last 20 years. This is something that 71% of Ontarians support in a poll that came out just a couple of months ago. And since the last election, 3 polls have come out with a majority of Ontarians of every region, of every political stripe, of every age saying that they support this.
I know you have been hammering away at this for quite some time, and I suspect you've not convinced anybody else at this table to go along with you. Am I wrong? Has anybody else agreed to do this?
So, Steve, I have a question for everybody else, because maybe this isn't the perfect solution to getting this across. But if you don't agree with this, with my particular proposal, what is the idea? How else could you guarantee access to schools for these students? How else could you guarantee that teachers aren't discriminated against? How else can we guarantee that LGBTQ plus students aren't discriminated against in the classrooms right now as well?
I suspect, I'm not going to speak for them obviously, but I suspect the concern is, based on what we've seen in the previous decades on this issue, that the toxic mix of education, politics, and religion is nothing anybody wants to go near. How come you don't fear that?
Because I'm not afraid of doing what I think is the right thing to do, and what the majority of Ontarians say is the right thing to do. Like you mentioned, the majority of the opposition to this is political. It's not moral or ethical. They understand that we'd be better off if we could put our kids together and learn from each other. We don't separate our kids in hospitals. We don't separate our kids anywhere else in the public system. Why do we do it in our schools? And could we not come up with a better system with all the expertise that we have in this province right now?
Brenda, I guess I can invite you to either go for the original question, which was how would you bring an end to the strike,
Right.
or you can talk to us about separate school funding. What do you like?
Well, not surprisingly, I'm going to talk about the strike.
Okay.
I've done thousands of negotiations as a lawyer, and one of the things that strikes me as shocking about this process is how it's all taking place in the public, on Twitter, on Facebook, and how the government is playing an active role in basically trolling the teachers. And that is something that in any other professional negotiation forum would just not be on. When we negotiate, we are in a cone of silence, and nobody is talking about either side's position. We are respectful. And the reason why that's important is because it's very hard to make concessions when someone is trolling you. Sometimes it's the appropriate thing to do in a negotiation, to blink, like maybe you see the other side's point. But when you're made to look weak or ridiculed in the public, if you take a step back, then everybody's log jammed. So the government's basically created a situation where it's very hard for anyone to move. And that just shouldn't be that way.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Could you imagine Liz Sandals, Kathleen Wynne, or Mitzie Hunter making a video talking about the teachers during negotiations? I just couldn't even imagine that.
Poorly about
I
the
could not
teachers.
even imagine Mitzie saying I could not imagine that. And it's shocking to me that this is like, every second day a new video comes out from this minister talking about the negotiations. It's shocking.
I do recall a previous Liberal government unilaterally imposing a settlement, which eventually ended up in the Supreme Court of Canada, and you guys
Absolutely.
lost.
Yeah.
So this happens with all parties.
Yeah, you know what? There's going to be there will be times where there's disalignment between political parties and organized labor. But my point is not the court piece. It's more about the tone and how you approach it, and really around the negotiations. Coming from the school board, going back to Brenda's point, the negotiations were always done within closed doors. They negotiated. There was a respectful tone. The parameters were set by boards, or in this case, government. And then you came out with a solution to do that.
They've told me in my ear, I gotta tamp you down. You got more time than everybody else right now. Okay, but let's just come full circle here. And Stephen Del Duca, I'll finish off with you on this. Can we get a commitment out of you today that if you become the next Liberal leader, and who knows, maybe Premier somewhere down the road, you will not introduce mandatory e-learning into the classrooms, and you will leave the class sizes where they are right now?
Yes.
You have that commitment?
Yes.
Moving on. You know what? Why don't we go to a wide shot here? We're about almost a little more than halfway through all this, and I guess we should just remind anybody who tuned in late, we've got the 6 candidates for the leadership of the Ontario Liberal Party here with us in our studio, actually called the William G. Davis Studio here. Pretty good education minister back in the 1960s. And March the 7th is decision day for Ontario Liberals. They'll gather at a convention, and one of these 6 is going to be the next leader. Now, let's move on and talk about, where do we want to go here? How about the new Ontario subway line? This is nothing anybody here campaigned on. It was nothing anybody here had an idea about. It's an idea that came forward from the current government. It goes from Ontario Place to the Science Centre, which I guess is your riding, I guess.
Riding, yeah.
All right. Well, why don't you start us off? Do you support this?
I support any increased transit plans in Ontario.
Anything?
In Toronto, most, yeah. I would say, Hamilton was something that I supported. The expansion of the Eglinton line, the project in many parts of Ontario. So I'm a big supporter of investments into public transit.
Okay. The Ontario line good for you, Alvin?
Absolutely. And we need to stop redrawing the map every time we have another election. I used to work for Brad Duca, and he's been talking about the Scarborough subway, as with Mitzie, for the last decade.
So
it's going to be another 10 years before we build it, because every single time another provincial or municipal government comes along, they redraw the map. So we need to build it.
Maybe we can cut to the chase here then. You want to go to a wide shot, Sheldon, and just see, does everybody here on side for extending the Yonge subway north into Markham, the Scarborough subway, the Ontario line, and Eglinton, Crosstown, and Finch West? Everybody on side with all this?
Well, there's a missing link to that plan,
Go ahead.
Steve. And in my community, the Eglinton Crosstown, expanding it from Kennedy Station to the U of T Scarborough campus, my alma mater, and even beyond into Malvern. We have to make sure that all our communities are connected to rapid transit. And as Alvin said, we can't just do it randomly. The issue that I have with the Ontario line was that it was done without any consultation at all. And even many of the decisions are done without any consultation, expert input. And that's just not the way to do big transit projects.
But we are where we are, so
But
if you
we
become
are where
premier,
we are.
you
We would
keep it going.
continue. We would keep it going
Okay.
because the reversing decisions cost us money.
Okay. Just as you've made a lot of headlines with your position on the separate school funding issue, you've made a lot of headlines with your position on getting rid of all transit fares.
Yeah.
And just so I'm clear, this is for OC Transpo, this is for TTC, this is for Go Transit.
This is a 10-year plan in the province to look for ways to incrementally reduce barriers to transit, and with an eventual goal of making transit free where possible.
So you'd phase it in over 10 years.
Yeah, so we do it in Ontario already. Go Transit for kids is free. Toronto has under 12 TTCs free. The reduction, I think it's the $1 fare in Brampton for seniors now, and there's more of those projects throughout the province. I think Kitchener has some, London, Kitchener, all that whole southwestern Ontario
What's
has
the price
lots of-
tag on that?
You have to. So I called for a new deal with municipalities to look for ways to share revenue and look for ways to support transit and municipalities. And I think that if you build a relationship where there's predictability and stability within the system, that municipalities long term can put in the right type of planning to reduce the barriers to transit.
I'm not hearing a number.
There is no number, because each municipality would have to decide which direction they would like to go and where they would like to actually place those investments.
Kate Graham's got a number.
Yeah, at the fare box revenue right now for transit systems would be about $3 billion a year, depending on what you're including. So while I absolutely agree with Michael that we need to be making transit more affordable, in a time of climate change, in a time where many parts of Ontario, people are in single occupant vehicles because they have no other choice, to me, if we are going to make that kind of investment, it wouldn't be in making existing transit free. That's a great goal for us to move towards. Instead, I would like to see that money invested into building more transit.
Stephen Del Duca, can you sign on to the Coteau plan?
So, one of the things, I get exactly where Michael is coming from. And look, the really good news is that there are 6 candidates here today running for the leadership of our party. And I'm pretty sure, based on past experience from all the discussions, everyone here supports transit, generally speaking. And the really good news from my perspective is that we're up against a premier who believes in killing transit. I mean, Michael mentioned
Whoa, how can you say that?
Hamilton LRT.
Well, okay, that's
Hamilton LRT is being
one
killed.
project he's canceled, and he's spending $28.5 billion on other stuff.
So high-speed rail in the
40%
Southwest,
decline in infrastructure in
Hamilton
rural
LRT,
Ontario.
Operational funding.
Do
you want more examples?
Okay,
the increase to
this
the
one's
provincial
working, I
gas
can
tax
see.
program that was going to help 107 municipalities across the province with close to, from what I can recall anyway, $300+ million in additional transit funding. They got rid of the increase that we had brought in. So you know, at the end of the day, I think the good news for Liberals is that we plan to move, all of us, in the right direction on this. I do think there are ways in the interim, on a short-term basis, to actually make transit fares more affordable. I've called for an off-peak discount for transit fares across the province. So what I've called for specifically is a 50% discount for off-peak transit fares, which would have a couple of side benefits. Number one, it would make transit more affordable and more accessible. Secondly, I think for overburdened transit systems like we have in places like the TTC, the GTA, I think it would actually shave down some of the really tough peaks that we have in commuter patterns on platforms like at Yonge and Bloor, for example. Would do the same thing in other municipalities as well. And lastly, the buses, the streetcars, the subways, the GO trains that we have, they're already running during peak and off-peak periods for the most part. By encouraging more off-peak net new users to the system, we'd actually see, I believe, an increase in some of the revenue for the system. So as an incremental step, we should look at something like that. The long-term goal of making transit more affordable, I think, is something that I definitely would sign on for.
And you have to remember, my plan was specifically around the environment, and it's getting people out of their cars onto public transit to fight climate change.
Brenda, can you sign on to that?
I'm sort of more in Stephen's camp here. People aren't asking for free transit. And like I said before, there is no such thing as free. It's taxpayer funded. We need transit to be more affordable than a single occupant car. We need to make it attractive that way. But, you know, given the $3 billion Kate's talking about of revenue, I agree that's better invested in more transit, and you just make sure it's affordable.
Alvin?
I mean, I think you can do both, right? I mean, we have a carbon tax right now that I don't think is as effective as it could be. We eliminated $3.5 billion from provincial revenue because of canceling cap and trade that this government didn't see a use for. We can repatriate that carbon tax and have those revenues come to the Ontario government, spend $6.5 billion on fighting climate change, of which we can use it to make transit more affordable and to expand transit across the province.
Okay. Next subject here. As it happens, we are, I shouldn't be plugging the competition, but I think actually we're on tonight opposite the Democratic presidential candidates. And one of the criticisms that we've heard both of the Democratic Party in the United States and of the Labour Party in Great Britain is that it is, in the view of some, too obsessed with so-called identity politics, right? A little boutique something in each policy platform for this group, for that group, as opposed to, and forgive me for simplifying it this way, as opposed to Make America Great Again, which was one slogan which anybody could read anything into, and as we know, that one worked. I want to know whether or not you think your party is too obsessed with identity politics right now at the expense of the current party in power, which seems to have taken a broader swath to this issue, and they won. Alvin, start us off.
I mean, you have an incredible field. This is the most diverse field in Canadian history, right? I learned the other day I'm the first Chinese Canadian ever to run for leadership of any political party here in Ontario. Michael and Mitzie are the first Black Canadians ever to run for leadership of any political party here in Ontario. We have 3 women. Right? We need to be talking about our stories and why we're getting involved in politics. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think what we need to do is make sure that we're listening and we're connecting to these communities. Because in the last election, leading up to 2018, I can tell you, in the Chinese community here in Canada, in Ontario, we were not engaging with them. We were not engaging with them, and the other party was. The Progressive Conservatives had all sorts of misinformation in a number of ethnic communities, and we didn't feel that we needed to engage in that. And I feel like that was a mistake.
Mitzie Hunter, you want to come in on that?
I don't think that serves Ontarians very well. In fact, I actually think that Doug Ford engaged in that in the last election, and he had to go back on those types of commitments very fast. When it comes to the curriculum that was he campaigned on in terms of eliminating the sex ed curriculum, turns out that that curriculum is in place to keep our young people safe, that when you listen to public health and police officers, that's actually essential that young people know what consent is and how their bodies are developing. My awareness has really expanded during this campaign, campaigning in the north, in rural Ontario, and our values as Liberals, healthcare, education, really align with the values of Ontarians. And the policies that I've put forward have really spoken to that: affordable housing, school nutrition programs, and making sure that we invest in education so we build skills and talents for future.
Kate, is there too much identity politics at Queen's Park these days?
So I'm going to answer it in a bit of a different way than this discussion. So in the last election, I actually do think we were out-communicated by the Conservatives. So the message of "for the people," there is a reason that worked, right? In a democracy, that is literally how our government is supposed to work. People want to know that they have power, that when there's something that they want to see changed, that their government is listening to them. Now, I'm not sure that this government's lived up to that promise, but that basic message of a government that listens to people, that is there to serve people, that is the kind of basic foundation that we need to return to. I think that was very much a comment on how people are feeling about politics in general, and there's some wisdom there that we need to use to guide the way going forward.
Stephen Del Duca.
I think there's no doubt that there are different segments within Ontario that need the protection of government. They are vulnerable for a whole wide variety of reasons. And they have an expectation, and rightly so, that their premier, their government, that Queen's Park, generally speaking, will be there to have their back and be on their side. But I think on balance, what motivates most Ontarians is wanting to see a public education system that's properly funded. They want to see a public healthcare system where they as patients or their families are at the center of the decision-making process. They know climate change is a scientific fact, not a partisan issue. They want a real plan to confront it. They want an economy that's prosperous, where the prosperity is broadly shared. And I think in the main, that's what Ontarians expect of their premier and their government to deliver for them. But as Liberals, we are socially liberal. We are socially progressive. We know there are segments of society, for whatever reason, are vulnerable and need our support and need our help, because we can only go as far as we all go together.
Brenda, what if you champion those communities to such an extent that Mr. and Mrs. Everyday Ontario think you've taken your eye off them?
Well, that's a communication problem, like what Kate said. I mean, we Liberals don't do that. Liberals are traditionally a centrist party, and we look after where the people are, which is in the middle. But sometimes when we talk about other groups, I forget what you called them, but Mr. and Mrs. Ontario may feel like they're not being served when all the services are still there. So it's really a question of reminding of Ontarians, and I think maybe the last government didn't do that as well as they could have. Let's remind Ontario of everything that we've done for them.
Last quick word to Michael Coteau on this.
Yeah, I get people coming into my office, constituents complaining about, for example, refugees and the fact that they're getting too much money from the government, and I'm not getting enough as a senior. And there's a lot of miscommunication out there, and this to me is just it's a result of the erosion of liberalism and the embracing of populism in the world, really. And I think the minute we feel ashamed as Liberals to defend those who need our help, then we compromise our very essence of what it means to be a Liberal.
Okay.
Michael, you're absolutely right. And I think the big thing that we need to
Thank
remind
you.
people is that Doug Ford was dog whistling to people who had those concerns. He went to Northern Ontario and said, we need to stop these programs, letting in these refugees, these immigrants, and we need to take care of our own.
Lisa MacLeod did the same
What do
thing in
you
the
mean when you
legislature.
say that,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he's clearly dog whistling to people who are not thinking of immigrants and refugees as a boon to our economy and what we need to move forward in the future.
Okay, less than 10 minutes to go here, and I want to quote the late, I know time flies when you're having a good time. I want to quote the late, great Bobby Kennedy, who used to say, when you got a problem, shine a light on it.
Right.
And I want to just take a few minutes here and get each of you to respond to, as in my travels around the province and talking to people about all six of you, I want to feed back to you some of the criticism I've heard and get you to speak to it. Okay? Here we go. No. How about yourselves? So here's what I hear about Alvin Tedjo and Kate Graham. I hear the same stuff that they hear in the States about Pete Buttigieg, that you two have no political experience of significance and that you're in your mid-30s and therefore too young to take on this job. Go.
Do you want me to give a Pete Buttigieg answer? So I don't know that if this was the last leadership race that I would be running, truth be told. The person who became the leader became the premier, the next day. This is a very different moment. So this is a party that's had its worst defeat in its history. We are very in debt. We've lost official party status. We need to rise up into something quite different. And so the fact that I am a new face and we can turn a page on the past, the fact that I have experience outside Queen's Park, I know how tough it can be to work with Queen's Park. The fact that I live outside the GTA, there's a real sense that the party had become very GTA focused. Those things qualify me for this job. Those things give me the ability to lead a party at a time when we need a different kind of leader. So I think those things are all real benefits.
Alvin.
Obviously, I agree with Kate. I mean, I think that we are at a point where we need to give people a reason to vote for us. And all the things that you hear about stereotypes about millennials, about being lazy and entitled, is because we've been fed this dream that we can achieve, home ownership and we can get a job and we can do all that if we work hard enough. That's not true. That is not true. And it's time that our generation and people our age stepped up and took some responsibility, ran for office, and tried to change that.
Brenda, the knock on you is you got into the 11th hour, you've never run for anything before, why should we trust the party to you? That's what I hear.
Right. Well, the 11th hour, if I could go back in time, I definitely would have started earlier. But the fact is, I felt it was important that my voice was heard. There is a dearth of private sector experience at the table. There are lots of people with lots of very interesting experience. But I've been a lawyer, it'll be 23 years tomorrow, and 15 years this month running a business, a multi-million-dollar business. I employ a lot of people. I've served a lot of Ontarians. I have a very different experience than a lot of the people at the table, and I think Ontario's crying for a different face, looking for a different experience.
Which Democratic candidate is she? Can you do that
It's
for all
not
of
a
us?
perfect comparison every time out. Okay. For Stephen Del Duca, for Mitzie Hunter, and for Michael Coteau, I hear if this party's really trying to turn the page and show how different they are from the Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty years, why would we pick three people who were all representatives of those governments and had senior roles in their cabinets? Okay, Mitzie Hunter, go.
So I'm running on a change platform. I believe that Ontarians and our party need change, and that when Ontarians really look at the Liberals again, they're going to want to see a new face, a new voice, new ideas for the future of this province. And I've been in the party and elected for the last 6 years, but before that, I've created my own company. I've worked in Canada's largest corporation as a director, and of course in things like social housing and civic action that brings people together to solve tough and difficult challenges. I think that that's the kind of leader that is important to our party and the type of leadership that's important to our party.
Michael Coteau, if the party wants something new, why would they pick you?
Well, I think the party wants something new, but also recognizes, where we were as Liberals over the last 15 years, and in fact, the Liberal legacy not only in the province but the country. And I'm proud of many of the initiatives the Liberals brought forward here in Ontario. And personally, as a minister responsible for files like the Pan Am Games or autism services. Raising the age of protection, like everything that that I was associated with, I believe as a minister, I brought improvements to, and I think that's what people are looking for: practical politics, where you can get someone who can go in there, fix something, and understands how government works. And I have that to offer. And I'm a little bit different than Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty. My personal story is different. My experiences are different. I think I can bring a new sense of what it means to be a Liberal into this party.
Okay. Stephen Del Duca, the line I've heard in politics for decades is, Tories fall in line, Liberals fall in love. People in the Liberal Party want to fall in love with their leader. I hear a great deal of respect for your organizational skills, for your fundraising abilities, for your platform. I hear lots of that. I don't hear anybody saying, boy, I've fallen in love with Stephen Del Duca. Can you speak to that?
Have you spoken to my wife lately? I mean, that's because I'd like to hear the answer. No, I'm just kidding. All kidding aside. I respect that. I understand where people are coming from. I want to echo a bit of what Michael said just a second ago. We as Liberals should be enormously proud. I certainly am, because for 15 years, while we weren't a perfect government, we delivered really incredible progress that will stand the test of time. Earlier, I talked about the Green Belt, full-day kindergarten, no longer burning coal to produce our electricity.
Okay, but if
and
you're
there's more
not,
of that. So
how are you going to inspire people if they're not in love with you
with
in the
the
way they
ideas.
were with Justin Trudeau 5 years ago?
With the ideas that we put forward. And it's not about one individual or one personality. It's about the team. And it's about the ideas that captivate the people in this province on a whole host of issues that are going to matter for them when it comes to the progress that they're looking for from Queen's Park. And they know that progress isn't going to happen under Doug Ford. So it's about the team, it's about the ideas, and I'll work extra hard if I'm successful in March to make sure some people fall in love with me.
Well, if you thought that question was a bit chippy, I think you'll like this next graphic. Can we bring this up, please, control room? Heading into the convention, there have been delegate selection meetings, and this is what, roughly, the first ballot is going to look like. Of course, there's, I think, 600 plus superdelegates for whom this is not accounted for. But Stephen Del Duca, as that graphic indicates, has an enormous lead right now over Michael Coteau, Kate Graham in third, Mitzie Hunter in fourth, Alvin Tedjo in fifth, Brenda Hollingsworth in sixth. I guess I want to know, is this thing basically over?
No.
Really? Because those numbers sure indicate that if it's not over, it sure looks over.
So I may be the youngest person on the stage, but I've been around politics enough to know it is never over till it's over. The question that this race is about, and that the convention in March is about, is are we the party of the past or are we the party of the future? That is what will be on people's minds as they head in.
Would a Stephen Del Duca-led party be a party of the past?
I think we need to show that we have changed in a significant way. Yes, this is bigger than any one person, but the party needs to show that we look very different than we don't want to have the 2018 election again. We need to show that we are a different party with different leadership. That's one of the reasons
Very
I'm
little
in this
time
race.
left. Go ahead, Mitzie.
Listen, I think that we have to accept the will of the membership of this party. That's what this race is about. I'm certainly in the race until it's finished, but I also see the numbers and see that the majority of the people who have cast a ballot are selecting Stephen as leader. I really liked your response that you just gave, Stephen, that talked about team. Because at the end of the day, that's what Liberals are about. We're about a great big red tent with everybody contributing.
30 seconds left. I actually should let him respond to this. Is this thing over? Have you got it won?
In our system, it's not over until delegates show up to the convention, register, and vote. And there's nobody on the stage who's going to be complacent about the work that's ahead of us, including me. I'm going to keep working hard right down to the wire, but it is about team. And regardless of who wins, any one of us on the stage, the party will be united, we will be focused, and we will beat Doug Ford and get Ontario back on track.
Are you all guaranteeing that you're going to run again in the next election, regardless of who wins this convention?
I'm so proud of the work of my team. Yes.
Yes.
I can't answer that question. 2 years is a long time for now. My intention would be to run again. I love serving my community, but that's 2 years from now.
Brenda, you going to run?
I'll run a nomination.
Run a nomination. Alvin, you're running again?
Sure, yes.
You're running again? You're running again,
Yes.
regardless of whether you win or
Yes.
don't? You are. Okay, that's our time. Thanks, everybody. Really glad you could spare some time on the hustings to come into TVO and answer our questions. And the finish line is in sight, right? Those are the 6 candidates for the Ontario Liberal leadership. A reminder, we'll have gavel-to-gavel coverage on Saturday, March 7th of the Leadership Convention. You can dial us up at tvo.org/theagenda and follow the fun online with the rest of us.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.